That is Jeremy and Adrienne Camp, husband and wife team there, a wonderful duet about their married life, whatever may come. And Adrienne Camp was Adrienne Leshing, originally from South Africa, so there's an obvious link. Welcoming to the program, Wynand Jacobs from FamilyLife. Kia ora, thank you for your time today.
Kia ora, good morning, Andrew. Well, I just love that. Andrew, sorry, not Andrew, Jeremy Camp was one of my favorite artists when I was growing up.
Yeah,
aspiring musician myself at the time, and just loved his work. And my favorite concert was one where he actually spoke about his late wife. You know that he lost just early on in their marriage, and then obviously now making this beautiful music. And there's been a movie released about just life and restoration. And what a great story.
It is a wonderful story, and extra points for marrying a South African. Do you think?
Come on.
I was kind of cross at the time because Adrienne was in a band called the Benjamin Gate, who I was a big fan of, and then when she married Jeremy, she gave up her own musical dreams. But yeah, I've moved on from that. I've forgiven Jeremy, and that's kind of the topic that we're talking about today. Moving on, breaking destructive cycles that can sometimes come from conflict. We were talking a little bit about this last week with the forgiveness and how important that is. But
that's right.
I think it's one of my favorite scriptures about a dog returning to his vomit. Sometimes we can circle back around, come back to our past mistakes and kick off a new round of it, right?
Totally. And that's the thing. Be keen, today just to touch on a little bit of how do we actually break those patterns? Because I think what happens in relationships often in marriage is we get stuck in a pattern. Like we get actually stuck in a pattern of not being able to push through our conflicts. Yeah. Now, as we've already covered, about 69% of our conflicts are recurring in nature. Yeah. They're perpetual. They won't go away. And so the key to being successfully married and to have a flourishing marriage is actually how you deal with these conflicts, how you embrace each other's differences. And there's an interesting thing, if you think about couples that are stuck in this recurring pattern, it's the same thing that tripped them up every single time. And maybe you've become a little bit despondent, maybe even apathetic about that situation. You see it happen and it's like, oh, there it happens again. Oh, there it happens again. There it happens again. And it's just constant. Oh, you'll never change. You always do this. Very destructive narrative to have, whether or not I actually say it out loud. If that's happening in my mind in our marriage, there's a thing called a phenomenon called the RAS effect. Now, RAS, R-A-S, that's short for the reticular activation system, I think. I'm not a brain scientist, but that's a part of your brain. Yeah, that's a part of your brain that actually helps you to recognize things. Because there's a lot of information, when you look around the world, there's a lot of things that you see. Take, for example, Tesla. I don't know if you've noticed, but I live in Auckland and I've just noticed how many Teslas there are on the road. Yeah. Now, some of our listeners today, that's the car, by the way, for those of you that know the electric vehicle, Elon Musk, Tesla. Yep. But for some of you who haven't noticed the amount of Teslas on the road before, I can guarantee after this interview or this discussion, you will. Yeah. Or maybe, maybe there was a car that you looked at and then all of a sudden you saw how many people on the road. All of a sudden there's all these Toyotas on the road. Or, once you start paying attention to something, your RAS in your brain actually starts recognizing that thing over and over again. Yeah. It's not that all of a sudden there's more of these cars on the road. It's that, no, I've started paying attention to these things. Yeah. And that's what happens in our marriage. Like if we start focusing in on our spouse's flaws, we become critical about them, that becomes all we see. Mm-hmm. Right? So that actually it enters you into like a downward spiral in your relationship, which is very unhealthy.
Yeah, no, certainly. I know there'll be people identifying with this, not necessarily the Tesla thing, but very much being in that negative or destructive pattern and seeing the bad things in the situation. The bad things are the ones that stick out sometimes because, well, those are the ones that need fixing. Those are the ones that we want to be better in some ways. But
exactly.
Look, we're not saying that, hey, take some advice from Family Life and you'll never argue again. I mean, these are going to be recurring conversations, but we can break the destructive cycle and be better at the way in which we have disagreements. How can we break the negative pattern that goes with this, Wynand?
Yeah, if as with all things in life, if at first you don't succeed, read the manual. And that's true. Read the manual, and I'm talking about the book of life, God's book of life. The Bible, the words of life. If you think about it, I want to read this if you don't mind. It's in 1 Peter 2 verses 8 and 9. It says, "Now this is the goal, to live in harmony with one another and demonstrate affectionate love, sympathy, and kindness toward other believers. Let humility describe who you are as you dearly love one another. Never retaliate when someone treats you wrongly, nor insult those who insult you, but instead respond by speaking a blessing over them."
Wow.
And that last bit, we're called to live in harmony, and it's like, even if people insult you, like even in your marriage, you get these insults. Let's say I'm married to a critical spouse. Let's say I am the critical spouse. It's me, by the way. I'm a work in progress. We break the pattern of destruction in our relationship when, instead of giving an insult when we're insulted, this isn't fair, how dare you treat me this way, or actually speak a blessing.
Wow.
So when we're in a position to bless when we're insulted, we break that cycle. Otherwise, you just go insult for insult for insult, and it just goes down and down and down. But God says, break the spiral. And here's another one I'd add, by the book. Peter comes to Jesus and he says, if my brother has wronged me, sinned against me, how many times should I forgive him? 7 times? And Jesus, no, 7 times 70. 70 times 7. And it's just we, as Christians, the way we're trying to demonstrate Christ's love in our marriage is sowing forgiveness when the other person doesn't deserve it. If we ever fall into that state of, I don't deserve this, I need what I deserve. Well, imagine standing in front of God and say, God, give me what I deserve. It's no, he actually infused grace and forgiveness into life.
Yeah.
And understanding that for myself and being on that receiving end of God's grace and forgiveness enables me to inject that grace and forgiveness into my marriage. And then we break that cycle of constant criticism or being perpetually stuck in a recurring argument.
Well, I'm glad that Peter was taking notes when Jesus made that statement, because it obviously turns up later in the New Testament. And of course, it doesn't just apply to our brother, but to our husband, to our wife, and those that we're in the closest relationships with. And the thing I really love about this, Wynand, is that this is something we can do. This is something we can take responsible for without waiting for the other person to act. You talked about, sometimes there's one spouse or other who may be more critical. I'm not saying to be a doormat, but we can apply grace, we can apply forgiveness, we can give blessing where there is cursing, and look, we can do our part without them having to meet us halfway, as it were. We can start to turn things around just from one side, right?
Yeah, and one of the best bits of relationship advice I ever got, hands down, it was before we were married, and I was really struggling with just how the relationship was going. And I spoke to someone that I trusted, and they said, you know what? You'll something along the lines of your life will be, you'll have a happy life, when you learn how to forgive the apology that you've never received.
Wow.
So, the last bit really stuck with me. I can't remember what the initial thought was, but basically, when you learn how to forgive the apology that you've never received, you'll live with so much freedom. You'll live with so much joy and gratitude, because if I'm willing to forgive them if they apologize, why can't I extend forgiveness before they apologize?
Why wait? Yeah, no, it's
Exactly.
such wonderful words of wisdom. Certainly appreciate what you bring. Thank you for your vulnerability and for the work that you and the team do at Family Life. Of course, more of that available, and thoroughly recommend the podcasts and lots of other resources online, familylife.nz. Wynand, have a great week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. You too.